Hello and welcome back to the Boropolis podcast. As always, I'm joined with Nathan, and finally, Middlesbrough have given us a reason to smile. Nathan, this podcast is going to be a very, very different mood, a very different feel to what we've had to endure for the last month or so. Finally, we've got a win, and actually, we've got two to discuss. It's like London buses, they all come at once, don't they? So, I mean, usually I would ask how you're doing. I spent all day yesterday with you. I know that you were very much of the belief that we may be back at full time, as was I, clearly just getting carried away from the two wins. So I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to jump straight into the topic and just say, following the two results, of course, we'll discuss Stoke and of yesterday's win against Derby, but how are you feeling about Middlesbrough right at this very moment?
It's funny, Chris. I don't want to get too carried away off the back of two wins. Obviously, those wins are massively important for Michael Carrick's future at the football club, for the confidence of this playing squad, the belief in the fan base around our aspirations for the season and the final 2 months that we have left of this current season. But it's a funny old sort of time after the two results. I think that getting two wins is obviously great. It is massively important, but at the same point, we have played two sides who, from everything that I saw in the two games, were both horrific, really, and are down there at the bottom end of the championship table for a reason, really. So yeah, don't want to get too carried away with the performances. I thought Stoke was probably better than Derby in terms of performance, but all that matters in a situation where you were in a rut like we were is that you've got some points back on the board and you've got some momentum building once again.
Yeah, that is the main thing. And as you say, it was a case of we need to just stop the rot one way or another. And I think what is most telling from where we were last week is we said we needed to stop the rot. And I think you said in last week's podcast, okay, yes, very different opposition. But had we have got, like, let's say, a point at Bristol, the fan base won't have done a full 180 and said, actually, Carrick's the man to take us forward. Everything's rosy, but it would have stopped the rot. I think the feeling going into Stoke was a draw's not going to be good enough. We have to win. If this is going to continue, we have to pick up 3 points. And then hopefully, if you do, okay, it's very much a type of opposition that we've struggled against this season, but you go back to the Riverside off the back of a win against a Derby team that are ravaged with injuries and are not very good anyway when they've got a fully fit squad. It gives you a great chance to, as you say, build some momentum. So, yes, look, I think what I will say is, firstly, we've had a little bit of a joke about, oh, we're back and all this. A lot of what we discussed last week, a lot of what we discussed for the majority of this season, those feelings are still there. But at the end of the day, Middlesbrough have finally won some games. It's certainly eased the pressure on Michael Carrick. Those longer term questions about his managerial career moving forward and with Middlesbrough are still very much there, given everything that we've discussed and where Middlesbrough find themselves in the table. But we've won two games. Let's not get bogged down and stray away from what should be a very positive and upbeat podcast. So let's get into Stoke then, Nathan, because as we say, it was such a huge game. And again, the thoughts pre-game were very much Michael Carrick is going to have to make changes again. There's going to have to be a shuffling of the pack. There's probably going to have to be another sort of variation of forward players to try and create a spark, get something going. And in fairness to Michael Carrick, I felt that he managed to get a little bit more of the balance in terms of the attacking players on the pitch right. And I think we looked a lot more like a Michael Carrick team from the changes. Obviously, we had a few defensive changes that we were forced into, but especially in attack, Iheanacho coming out of the team was the big one for me, which kind of made us a little bit more fluid. And like you said, sorry, I thought the performance was pretty good.
Yeah, the front four of Conway leading that. Marcus Force off the right, Whitaker in the 10, and Azaz off the left were very fluid, were interchanging. At times you saw Force leading the line. You saw Whitaker dropping right, Azaz dropping more central. It was very fluid, as I say, and I thought that we started the game pretty well. We obviously got into the lead relatively early on in the game, but yeah, they were pretty poor throughout long spells of the game, especially early on. And yeah, Boro fluid playing through the thirds. It comes out to Force. Azaz makes a good run to pull away a defender. Force drives into that space left by him and on his weaker foot buries it right in the top corner. Great finish. And yeah, Marcus Force's first Borough goal of the season, which is very nice and strange. The fact that it's taken this long, but the injury problems of Force, we all know all too well that there is a player in there, 100%, but his injuries have let him down recently. So hopefully, this is the start of a prolonged run in the team for him.
Yeah, absolutely. If you've listened to this podcast for long enough, you'll know that I'm a big fan of Marcus Force. And it's just purely down to the fact that he gives me real Christian Stuani vibes. Not necessarily in play style, but just in the sense of he's worth having on the pitch because if he gets a chance, 9 times out of 10, he's going to make the goalkeeper work. And he's one of them where I think genuinely, and look, we'll get on to the highs and lows of Tommy Conway's Stoke performance. But I think genuinely, other than Conway, it's probably without question that Marcus Forss is still the best finisher at the football club by a mile. I think even, going back to when we first signed him, a lot of Brentford fans said there's drawbacks to his game. There's a lot of things that he could certainly improve on, but this was at a time when they had the likes of Ivan Toney. We would still say, naturally, Marcus Forss is a better finisher. Yeah, as I say, I love him being in the team just because he gives you that goal threat. And he's probably been unfortunate in terms of timing from returning from injury this season because, of course, Ben Doak was or has been really one of Middlesbrough's best players. So when he did initially return, didn't really have the opportunity to come back in the team, had a few stints as a striker. I think, to be honest, although the conversation around Marcus Forss has always been play him central, play him through the middle, I think now, and I've very much asked the same question, I think, to be fair, Marcus Forss is most effective off the right, and credit to Michael Carrick because that was sort of his brainchild, if you want to call it that. But yeah, as you say, great to have him back in the team. And hopefully you just get a Marcus Forss that's fit for a number of games now, because I think you kind of put him and Riley McGree in the same category of great on the day, but can't be relied upon. And I just hope that we can now rely on Forss for a sustained period. As you say, in terms of the performance, I actually felt that it was good. And I've seen a lot of conversation about how bad Stoke were. I do agree. Stoke are, without doubt, one of the worst teams I've seen in the Championship for a long, long time. If I'm a Stoke fan watching that during the week, I'd be very, very fearful. There's lots of teams like in and around the bottom that are bad, but like the likes of Plymouth, they've got a bit of fight. They aren't great. They don't have a lot of quality, but they'll kind of battle it out and try and get scruffy points. Stoke were miles off it. And somehow, I mean, it's Boro of this season, isn't it? We do let them back into the game through someone who you've pointed out yesterday has actually become somewhat sort of prolific against Middlesbrough. What the modern day Martin Waghorn or Matt Derbyshire or whoever you want to say.
Yeah, Jun Ho. Yeah, just before that, Conway missed that chance, didn't he? I
Yeah.
thought after as soon as he missed the chance, I think every Borough fan had the same feeling, which was these have been awful, but they're probably going to score now. And
Yeah.
as you say, they did a little bit of a defensive lapse from ourselves. From that point, going into half time, alarm bells were ringing for me. The fact that we played well in the first half and still hadn't gone into the break in the lead when we should have been. We should have been 100%. Stoke hadn't had a lot of efforts at all, really, or sustain possession or sustain pressure. But yeah, we still found ourselves going in at the break level, which was sort of unfortunate, but the reaction was great in the second half. Hackney driving through midfield for the second goal, plays it into Conway, a little flick round the corner for Azaz, who takes one touch out of his feet and with his weaker left foot puts it in the corner. And from that point, I'm going to be honest, I did feel a lot more at ease, a lot more comfortable, despite the low confidence of this squad, the previous results. I just thought Stoke are that poor. I can't see them scoring a second goal unless we literally gift wrap it for them.
And that can't be ruled out with this Middlesbrough team. But no, I agree with what you're saying there. As soon as we went back in front, I did think I'd be very, very surprised if even Middlesbrough find a way to not win this game. It's an interesting balance, I think, because as I say, I don't want to downplay the fact that I thought that we looked better and it wasn't a bad performance. And it wasn't just the fact that Middlesbrough won the game because Stoke were that bad, but also Stoke were, I want to emphasize, as bad as I've seen in years. So I think, as you say, there was very much a feeling of just see it out, get the 3 points, stop the rot, stop the losing streak. Most importantly, if this result is basically what sparks Boro's season into life, and I'm not saying it's going to, but if it is, I think everyone will look back at those full-time scenes at Stoke away and think that was kind of the kickstart. And I just want to give massive praise to Tommy Conway, who I think throughout this run, throughout everything that he was sort of abused with at Bristol City, he's been an absolute shining light. And there was major question marks when we saw Latte who we replaced him with. And I think it was slightly sort of missed about the fact that everyone knew that we had a good player with Tommy Conway, but it was almost missed the fact that, and you, to be fair, made the point on the podcast after January that Tommy Conway, it was always kind of planned, or you felt it was, that Tommy Conway was always going to be Boro's number 9 eventually, because they almost anticipated losing Latte. And because of how bad, no offense, Keller, because of how bad Iheanacho's been, the conversation hasn't been, well, Conway's doing okay or has been doing well. It's been, I can't believe we replaced Latte with Iheanacho. I think Conway's been brilliant, not only on the pitch, but also off it as well. The way that he's conducted himself in terms of doing interviews in the media, just a little bit of transparency, saying we know how much it hurts. And sometimes it's like you feel that words and Instagram posts are just, empty words from football players. I genuinely think that Tommy Conway's done a great job, and Delano, Bergsorg, Neto, those three especially, in such, when we went to Stoke, and it was basically hanging in the balance at 1-1 whether we were going to have another one of those away ends where potentially the squad was going to be hurled abuse at. The rot continues. We don't beat Stoke. I think in terms of just being open, honest, transparent about where the squad's at, and then making sure that it was apparent to the supporters and the supporters to the players. It was just a big moment. I felt that, yes, okay, people will say it's a bit tin pot, and I do slightly agree. But as I say, those full-time scenes at Stoke, it did feel like, most importantly, that these players still very much have full belief in Michael Carrick, and they are playing and trying their very best. And you said that as well last week, in fairness. This squad of players, admittedly, there's a lot of flaws in their makeup, but I generally do think they care. And sometimes when it comes down to bad results, I think as a fan, you just hope that your group of players, your squad and your manager, that's apparent. And I think it very much is. That's one of the silver linings that's come out of this bad run. I think you can tell that they haven't thrown the manager under the bus. They were a little bit, but certainly not intentionally. But they still believe in Michael Carrick and they're playing for this manager.
Yeah, 100%. I even said that after the Watford game, in which we were quite cutthroat about the team selection and the changes of that game. I still maintained that you could see that the players were trying 100%. They never stopped trying for the manager at any point so far. But yeah, it was massively important to get that win on Tuesday night. The scenes, as you said, are good. They show unity between supporters, between players, and you could see that it meant a lot to them to get that win. But I said on Tuesday night, it's great that we've won a game and we've had false dawns at points this season where we win a game and you think that can be the kickstart, that can be the kickstart, that can be the kickstart, but it has to be followed up with another one against a poor Derby side that are struggling, fighting for their lives down the bottom of the table. Now, look, they are injury barren, but you have to just play with a little bit of freedom and deal with them at home. And yesterday was not anywhere near a fantastic Middlesbrough performance that we've seen even this season. Yesterday was a real slog, a difficult watch at times, but I think what we can say is that in the end, the best team won. We had the better chances in the game, which is great. The fact that last week we came on here and talked about Boro's defensive frailties, but also that we weren't creating many chances either. In the last couple of games, we've sort of gone back to of old and started creating chances again. Created three really good goals on Tuesday night, should have been four, and then yesterday as well. Hitting the post twice, having efforts saved by the goalkeeper, having shots blocked left, right, and centre in the instance of the goal. But look, it's a game where you won't remember anything that happened in the game, just the final score, which is the main pleasing point. And yeah, it was nice to come away from that game and know that you've edged a scrappy one.
Yeah, I mean, we sat after the game and I said to you, I mean, I'm sure there will have been a game this season, but it genuinely felt like that was the first time all year for for a very, very long period that Middlesbrough, as you say, were the better team, ultimately deserved to win the game, and scored a relatively late goal that felt just like they got what they deserved. That I feel like Middlesbrough and both me and you rightfully have, especially earlier on this season, criticised Middlesbrough for dropping points or not taking maximum points from games like yesterday. And as you say, look, whichever way it goes in, I really couldn't give a monkeys, to be honest. But Finn Azaz finds that moment to blast one into the top of the net. And it just felt like, again, we might go to Swansea and lose next week. But it just felt, if ever there was a moment where Iheanacho's volley, falls into the path of Azaz, if there's going to be life in this season, it kind of had to be yesterday. And I don't want to overdo it. Look, Middlesbrough is still very much, you could say, underachieving this season. But I just felt you could tell from the celebrations even that felt a really, really big goal. And I actually thought, courtesy of also what the Derby fans brought, in fairness, I thought the atmosphere was as good as what it has been, at least with a crowd of that size at the Riverside all season yesterday. They just felt like that little bit extra, and possibly building on from momentum from Tuesday night, that rapport between players and fans, and just something to kind of build on. And sometimes I guess that's all you need. But yeah, as you say, look, we'll try our best to kind of reflect on the performance in the game in general. But as you say, by Wednesday, I'm pretty certain you could ask me anything about the game and I'll have already forgotten. I'll just remember Finn Azaz jumping into the crowd and celebrating that goal, because that was ultimately the very much the huge and very much needed moment for both Finn Azaz individually off the back of that goal and assist during the week, but also just Michael Carrick and Middlesbrough at the moment. I think one area which we probably do need to touch on, and it only got worse yesterday, of course, Rav didn't play at Stoke. We knew he was injured. There was a little bit of a rumour that he'd picked up a knock. And it was very much a case after the game that, well, Rav was kind of touch and go whether he was going to play against Stoke. It's not really going to be a long one. But Edmondson did go off. And then yesterday, Luke Ayling, who I must say, I thought did quite well at centre half. And I think moving forward is certainly that's going to be his role in this Middlesbrough squad if Anthony Dijksteel is fit. But Edmondson goes off against Stoke, and then Luke Ayling goes off yesterday. We're now very much at the point of kind of crisis, really. And I know he was asked during the week about free agents, and he said, it's not something we're looking at unless things get much worse. But, we were, by the end of yesterday's game, very much a makeshift back four. And given that Edmondson's going to be out for a little while longer than anticipated now, and there's not really any time scale on Rav van den Berg, one of the big points yesterday, other than obviously the win, was the fact that actually we're in a bit of a, well, it's not a bit, it's very much an injury crisis at centre half, which I don't want to be that guy, but not me, the whole fan base can very much vouch and say, sorry, Michael, but we did kind of mention this and it seems to have been ignored. And obviously, as of the way it goes, we now find ourselves in a position where Dale Fry is our only fit central defender, or senior fit central defender.
Yeah, it's not ideal, obviously, with the quotes after Tuesday night that Rav was touch and go for Stoke and then not in the squad again on Saturday. Hopefully, with another week's rest, he should be okay for Swansea. Really, I
He'll
don't
be back on the grass. It's fine.
back on the grass soon, hopefully. But positive note, Johnny Alton's back in the squad, so he'll be at centre half next week at Swansea anyway.
Yeah, possibly. Do you know what? I forgot. I forgot what Johnny Alson looked like, to be honest. It was very much nice to see him. And interesting, he's done it quite a few times previously that Carrick said there was no chance he was ever getting on the pitch. I just wanted him in and around the group. And I mean, although I'm not going to get into it, a lot of people have mentioned the whole leaders topic. And Johnny Alson's certainly not a shouter and a baller. But, I mean, he is a baller, but he's not a shouter and a baller. But he certainly leads by example. And I guess in tough moments, you need professionals with experience of going through runs like this Middlesbrough team have been on. So, yeah, very nice to see him back yesterday. But just in terms of themes again, I guess that front four, mainly, as you say, we had a few chances. Force was the big one in the first half, and although he doesn't put the ball in the back of the net, he does work the Derby keeper. Azaz hit the post pretty much right on half time. We didn't create an awful lot second half, but I felt again, okay, yes, he hasn't had any sort of meaningful major contribution just yet, but I felt that front four dynamic looks as good as what it has done for at least over a month now. There seems to have been a bit of a balance that kind of has been stumbled upon in the last two games that just looks to be, most importantly, getting the best out of the players in those positions. I think it's really harsh on Delano Bergzorg because you could argue he's been our best player during this terrible run. But I think that front four seems to work an awful lot better. Iheanacho coming out the team and his role not being a sort of 9 3/4 or like a mystery number 10 striker. No one really knows where he's meant to be playing. Thankfully, he did come out the team. So we've allowed Finn Azaz a position, to be fair, that has not always giving him his best moments in a Middlesbrough shirt. But I think most importantly, Morgan Whittaker seems to have started to show glimmers of the player that he could potentially be. And that partnership between him and Azaz, for Azaz especially, I think the spell out of the team is worked wonders, hasn't it?
At the minute, it looks like it. It still sort of remains to be seen whether these players can continue to put up performances like they have this week on a more consistent basis. I don't want to be anywhere near convinced by this team unless they decide in the next 3 games before the international break to string another 3 wins together. Yeah, I'm not going to get overly carried away after two results against Stoke and Derby, but yeah, they're looking a little bit more confident. There's still a lot of sort of bravery between the front four to play the way they do, with nice little intricate passes between each other. But yeah, I'll be interested to see sort of what the dynamic will look like when Doak's back. But what has changed apart from the personnel that we've talked about, getting that front four sort of more comfortable with each other? Do you think that you're seeing more application from a couple of players? I mean, you don't have to name names if there isn't any, but do you think there could be an element of luck as well, the way that things have landed for us, and I suppose the fixtures that have came as well with the two poorer opposition?
Yeah, I think in terms of luck, the old saying, you make your own luck. In this case, I think for where Middlesbrough were going into that Stoke game, they couldn't have picked two better fixtures than Stoke and Derby. Teams where both of them going into the games, their confidence was low, if not lower than what ours was going into the games. And in a game where both teams can't lose, I guess. And look, let's not beat around the bush. If we'd have drawn both games, it wouldn't have been good enough. But I think the fixtures have fallen very nicely, especially back to back consecutive games where you can start to build momentum. I don't think applications really change, to be honest. I actually think that's one thing that even during the bad run, and you said it and we touched on it at the top end of the podcast, I don't think that I've ever really felt, I mean, I know we hammered Iheanacho a bit, but that's purely down to his lack of fitness rather than effort, I think. At least I hope so anyway, in terms of I've not seen players not running when they should be, or not diving into challenges, or kind of, there's been individual errors, but it's very much been lapses of concentration, or just, bad mistakes, bad individual errors. I think one thing that has slightly been tweaked and a major standout is Neto Borges looks, I mean, I'm not going to go overboard. I still think that he's certainly not, a fantastic championship left back. But I think his performances have made a real major difference, because it's basically one less defensive worry. He hasn't been, tormented and given the runaround from a winger for a while, to be fair. Look, the goal that gets Bristol City back into the game, yeah, okay, it's his man that gets the cross in. But I actually felt that he performed okay there. I think in such adversity at Bristol, and look, I'm not like just sort of being pathetic and saying, oh, everyone's saying that he's doing better now, because he really shows that he cares, and went up to the away fans and looked distraught at Bristol. I do think that's probably helped his cause, because it shows people that he genuinely does care, and it's hurting him just as much as it was hurting all of us. But I can see an obvious improvement. So I think just one more of our defenders being somewhat reliable has had a big impact. I think Aidan Morris and Hayden Hackney, they're probably the two people in this team. I know Hackney comes under some criticism sometimes, and I think it's just the level of expectation that are on his shoulders, being the local lad, alongside Dale Fry in the team and being, the person that Porto have come and bid big money for in January. A lot of people think that Hayden Hackney will go on to big things, and I agree. I do think he will, but he does, in fairness to him, when he's bad, he is one of those players where there's never really an in-between. He's pretty consistently performs well, but if he has a bad game, like, you really know about it. I think he's been very good in the last two games alongside Aidan Morris, who probably doesn't get as much praise, but even yesterday involved in the goal, really starting to get back to a similar level to that of what we saw before his injury. And I think you're starting to see how big of a player that he is. Yeah, I don't think it's as such a personnel thing. Obviously, the system's been slightly changed, and I do quite enjoy we've seen limited sort of examples of it, but little flashes that we've seen where in this system that we seem to be playing, it almost in possession, Whitaker and Finn Azaz become like almost the top of a box midfield. It's like a bit of a double 10 type thing going on. And then Force is just sometimes picks up a central position, as you say, sometimes Conway will drift out wide, but usually you've got Finn Azaz and Morgan Whitaker in positions where they can hurt teams. And I know I touched on it before. And look, I'm very much like people probably have listened to this podcast and think that I don't like Finn Azaz. It's not the case. I just think he's very much a streaky player. And I just hope that he can find more consistency again, because look, the stats speak for themselves. It's no mean feat to go and get 10 goals and 10 assists in a championship season yet again at this stage of the season. But obviously there's still a conversation around, is he a streaky player? I seen someone mention earlier today that like Albert Adoma used to be very similar, but I feel like Albert Adoma's just sort of like blanket performance, if he didn't score or assist, he was still contributing very much and being good. I feel like when Finn Azaz isn't scoring or assisting, then he leaves a lot to be desired. But in fairness to him, he gets the decisive moment yesterday, has a really big impact in the Stoke game. And I think, look, for a 10, very different player, but I used to think about Lee Tomlin and think he might not do a lot, but he's got a moment of magic in him. And to be fair, 2 great finishes in the last 2 games. So I don't want to say when Finn Azaz plays well, Middlesbrough play well, because I don't think his performance was particularly amazing yesterday. But what I would concede is that when Finn Azaz gives you moments, usually, I guess, Middlesbrough perform or pick up more points because he is a major kind of goal threat when he wants to be.
Yeah, he is. And we've got 3 big games coming up now. And as mentioned, it's all about following these 2 up. You've played 2 poor sides, and you've got 3 now who I'd say are better sides than what we've played, but having built a little bit of confidence, built a little bit more momentum that we can sort of really attack a 3-game week coming up. We're going to do a big bulky podcast at the end of that 3-game week because you're jetting off to Tenerife next week, so we'll be missing next Sunday, but we'll be back just as the international break starts to do a full roundup of where we're at after the back of Swansea away, QPR at home, and Luton away as well. So we're just going to cover Swansea for now because that is up next, and we feel that QPR and Luton are a little bit ahead, and you can't really gauge their
One game at a time, cliche footballer answer.
literally.
We've got to take one game at a time. But yeah, you're right. Finally, as you can probably see from the podcast, to be honest, I could do with a bit of sun. I'm looking terribly pale, and a bit of a relax just to take my mind off Middlesbrough, that run of 5 games, to be fair. But as you say, we're going to do a big roundup pod going into the international break. So you'll have a full week and a bit or 2 weeks, whatever you want to call it, to listen to that on repeat. Hopefully after three more wins on the trot. But yeah, Swansea up next. They've had their own managerial uncertainty this season and currently have a temporary manager and interim boss. Luke Williams, after weirdly flirting with West Brom for weeks on end, finally got sacked. Swansea are a weird one because in my mind, we haven't got a good record or we never get results away at Swansea. But actually, over the last few years, we have, to be fair. And despite them not having that much of an inspiring season, I still feel like it's a really difficult away game, regardless of like what Swansea are doing in the league.
Yeah, it's just one of them.
Maybe it's just the travel aspect of it all.
Yeah, they're a very funny sort of side. I think everyone envisions Swansea as the possession Swansea as they were years ago, which is exactly what they are, really. They've had, on average, 60% possession in games this season in the Championship. However, as you've mentioned, Luke Williams has just sort of been sacked in the last 2 weeks or so. Alan Sheehan's there as caretaker currently. Prior to last Saturday, where they beat Blackburn 3-0 at home, they had 8 defeats in 10 in 2025 before that game last weekend and one win in that time. So literally horrific run of form since the start of the year. They lost the South Wales derby away from home at Cardiff. But yeah, they won the previous game 3-0 against Blackburn. And Blackburn are a pretty good side. I think that we know that based on our 2 results against them this season. They've had a couple of injuries recently, but that's by the by. Swansea 4-2-3-1. Lewis O'Brien in the midfield too, like he was for us last season. Also, we have an ex-Swansea player in our squad, Morgan Whittaker.
Yeah, and from all accounts, he didn't leave Swansea on great terms. I mean, I don't think he has on any of his transfers, but I think another one of those exits for Morgan Whittaker where he's not too well liked by the Swansea fans. So I mean, a perfect time to get your first goal.
And I've also got an interesting fact for you.
Go on.
Last season, Swansea City 0, Plymouth Argyle 1. Morgan Whittaker with the winner for Plymouth Argyle. So hopefully, I would take a Swansea City 0, Boro 1, Morgan Whittaker. That'll do me.
Yeah, it would be lovely. It really, really would be. And as you say, he tries enough of those scorchers from 25, 30, 35 yards out on his left, game by game, really. So, I mean, soon enough, surely one of those will fly into the top corner. I mean, we've seen his goal catalogue at Plymouth, to be fair, and it's a pretty decent highlight reel, in fairness. So let's hope one of those flies into the top corner. And yeah, we come away with all 3 points. But certainly just lovely to do a more upbeat podcast, 2 wins. We had a great day yesterday, didn't we, Nathan? And very much a nice place on Sunday evening to be finishing up a recording and thinking, I don't have a full week of work now where I've just got to think about yet another error leading to a goal that has ultimately cost us 3 points or 2 points or whatever, and another loss to be on the mind for a full week. So, yes, we're in a better place. Let's hope we can continue the momentum. And we won't see you next week, but we will see you on the eve of the international break. Thomas Tuchel's first international break as England boss, but more importantly, there'll be a monster edition of the Boropolis podcast and hopefully 3 more wins to discuss. So, as always, Nathan, thank you very much for your time this evening. Thank you, everyone, for watching and listening. As always, the support recently has been fantastic, so please keep that up. Subscribe on YouTube. Of course, leave a comment, leave any questions that you have for us. Obviously, on audio platforms, as they always say as well, you can like and rate and follow us. So please do that as well. But yes, thanks again. Finally, a positive Boropolis podcast. That has been another episode and a much better one at that. thanks ever so much for watching and listening again. And yeah, I guess we'll see you in 2 weeks' time. Hopefully I win plenty of money on me sunbed at Cheltenham. Thanks everyone again. Goodbye.